Every morning, without fail, the same figure could be seen on the far bench at Crestwood Park. While joggers passed by and children laughed near the playground, Thomas Becket, a man in his early 80s, would quietly take his seat on the old wooden bench beneath the sycamore tree. Rain or shine, weekday or weekend, it didn't matter. He always came, always alone. He wore the same brown jacket, frayed at the cuffs, and a faded gray cap that sat low over his pale blue eyes. He carried a wooden cane, though he hardly seemed to use it, preferring instead to sit upright, his back straight, hands folded neatly in his lap. People in the neighborhood had grown used to seeing him. He was just the old man on the bench. Some speculated he had lost his wife. Others assumed he lived nearby and simply came out for fresh air. But no one knew for sure, because no one ever asked. He never spoke to anyone, never read a book or used a phone. He would simply sit there for hours, his gaze fixed on the flagpole near the center of the park. The pole itself was old and a bit rusted, the flag tattered and weather-worn, barely lifting in the still morning breeze. Thomas watched it like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Most people passed him by without a second glance. Some nodded politely, others simply looked away. In a world that moved faster every day, Thomas seemed like a piece of another time, steady, silent, and out of place. But that didn't stop him from coming back, day after day, week after week. He never asked for attention. He never asked for anything. But sometimes, the people we notice the least are carrying the stories that matter the most. And one quiet morning, the silence surrounding Thomas Becket would be broken, not by words, but by something far more powerful, a flag raised in his name. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Eli Parker first noticed the old man on the bench. Eli was 10 years old, a curious, energetic boy who never walked when he could run. That day he was chasing his soccer ball across the grass when it rolled further than expected, coming to a stop near the sycamore tree. He jogged over to retrieve it, but hesitated when he saw the old man sitting there. Thomas Becket glanced up but didn't say anything. His gaze returned to the flagpole. Eli picked up the ball and paused. "Hi," he said, his voice soft. The old man nodded once. "You come here a lot," Eli added, gripping the ball awkwardly. Thomas looked at the boy, and to Eli's surprise responded, "I suppose I do." Encouraged, Eli tilted his head. "Why?" There was a long silence before the old man answered. "Habit. I like the quiet." Eli smiled. "My mom says I'm bad at quiet." Thomas gave a faint chuckle. "I can tell." From that moment on, something shifted. Each afternoon after school, Eli would wander over to the bench, sometimes sitting, sometimes just standing and talking while Thomas listened. He spoke about school, his favorite soccer players, his dog Max, and the ice cream truck that only came on Fridays. Thomas rarely spoke about himself, but he listened carefully. And once in a while he'd say something short, usually thoughtful, sometimes dryly funny. Eli liked that. One day, Eli showed up with a popsicle for himself and a second one, half melted, for Thomas. "It's orange," he said proudly. "The best one." Thomas accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you," and for the first time, stayed a little longer. As the weeks went by, Eli grew bolder. "Were you in the army?" he asked one day, eyeing the small eagle and anchor pin on Thomas's jacket. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't seem offended. "Not the army. Marines." "Did you fight in a war?" There was a pause. Then Thomas nodded. "Yes, a long time ago." Eli looked impressed. "Did you win?" Thomas looked at the flagpole and then at the boy. "We came home. That's something." It was the most he had said about his past. After that day, Eli stopped asking questions about the war, but he kept coming, and Thomas kept waiting. People in the park started to notice. The once lonely old man wasn't so alone anymore. A few parents smiled as they passed. A jogger offered a wave. Someone even brought him a cup of coffee one morning and said, "My dad was a Marine too." Still, Thomas never sought the attention. He just sat quietly, now with a boy beside him, who seemed to understand that not all heroes needed to talk to be heard. Little did Thomas know, Eli had been talking to someone else, someone who could do something more. It was a Saturday morning when Eli finally brought it up to his mother. They were eating pancakes when he said casually, "Did you know Mr. Beckett used to be a Marine?" His mom, Anna Parker, looked up from her plate. "Mr. Beckett?" "The old man on the bench," Eli said. "We talk sometimes. He said he fought in a war." Anna blinked. She had seen the man countless times but never thought twice. "Did he tell you what war?" Eli shrugged. "No. But he had a little pin, like an eagle and a globe. He said he came home. That's all he said." Anna was quiet for a moment. Then something stirred in her. She worked as a librarian and part-time local historian for the town council. Names, service records, newspaper clippings, those things were always floating around in her world. That afternoon, after dropping Eli off at a birthday party, she sat down at her desk and began to search. Thomas Beckett, Crestwood, Marine, Vietnam. It didn't take long. An old article popped up, yellowed and scanned from the archives of the Crestwood Gazette, dated 1971. The headline read, "Local Marine returns home after heroic rescue of unit under fire." The black and white photo showed a young man, square-jawed, lean, with fierce eyes, wearing a USMC uniform. The article described how Sergeant Thomas Beckett had pulled 2 wounded men from a burning vehicle under heavy fire and refused evacuation until all his men were safe. He was awarded the Silver Star but had declined a ceremony, requesting instead to return home quietly. Anna scrolled further. Another piece, this one from a year later. Veteran withdraws from public life after wife's sudden passing. Her heart tightened. No wonder he sat alone. No wonder he looked at the flag like it was more than fabric. It was memory and loss. She kept reading. More mentions, more fragments, until one headline caught her breath. Crestwood VFW requests flag replacement. Memorial Fund denied. It turned out the flag in the center of Crestwood Park had once flown over a Marine base in Vietnam. It had been installed in the 1980s, partially in honor of Beckett, though he'd never asked for it. Over the years, its story had been forgotten. No one had replaced the tattered cloth. And Beckett, he had just kept coming back, day after day, sitting beneath it, saying nothing. Anna shut her laptop. Something had to change. That week, she brought the articles to the town council. She proposed a small ceremony, nothing flashy, just a new flag, a plaque, and a few words spoken in respect. She explained who Thomas was, what he had done, how for over a decade he had sat quietly under that forgotten flag, honoring memories most people no longer knew. The council agreed. But Anna didn't tell Thomas. She told Eli instead, and together they planned to bring him to the park one final time, not just as a visitor, but as someone being remembered. The morning of the ceremony was warm, the sky clear and blue. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, city officials, veterans in uniform, and a handful of school children holding small American flags. Thomas arrived with Eli, walking slower than usual. He paused when he saw the fresh white cloth draped over a new plaque, the crisp new flag waiting to be raised. The familiar faces gathered silently around the pole. His brow furrowed. Eli stepped forward, gently tugging his sleeve. "They wanted to thank you," he whispered. Thomas's eyes searched the crowd, and then Anna approached, holding the old newspaper article in her hand. "You never asked for recognition," she said softly, "but you deserve it." Someone gave the signal. As the old flag was lowered with care, Thomas removed his cap and pressed it to his chest. A bugler began to play. The new flag rose slowly, bright against the morning light. The plaque was unveiled. "In honor of Sergeant Thomas Beckett, USMC for service, rendered in silence, and a life lived with honor." The crowd stood in silence as the flag reached the top. Thomas didn't say a word, but his eyes, shimmering and full, said everything. The ceremony ended without applause, and that was exactly how it should have been. The quiet was more powerful than any cheering could be. After the final note from the bugle faded, people slowly stepped forward. No speeches, no cameras, just handshakes, nods, and soft-spoken thank yous. One man, wearing a worn army cap, took Thomas's hand and said, "We never served together, but you carried something for all of us. Thank you." A woman who had passed by him in the park for years without ever speaking wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry I never stopped to say hello." Even a teenager from the local high school came forward, holding a sketch pad. He handed Thomas a drawing of the old bench under the sycamore tree, the tattered flag, and a man sitting beneath it, watching the wind. Thomas stared at the drawing for a long time before nodding. "That's me," he whispered. Eli stood beside him the whole time, a quiet guardian for the man who had once been a silent sentinel. Every now and then, Thomas would glance down at the boy and offer a smile, like a passing of something sacred between generations. From that day on, Thomas no longer blended into the background. The bench he always sat on was replaced with a new one: polished wood, brass plaque, and small flowers planted on either side. His name was etched in gold beneath the words, service, silence, strength. He still came every morning, but now he didn't sit alone. Sometimes it was Eli sitting beside him, kicking his legs and chatting about school. Sometimes it was another veteran dropping by to swap stories or sit in knowing silence. Sometimes it was a stranger who had read about him, hoping for a quiet moment of gratitude. And sometimes it was just the birds and the breeze. But even then, Thomas's presence no longer felt solitary. He belonged. People began taking better care of the park. The flag was never left to fade again. Local scouts polished the plaque. School field trips included the story of Sergeant Thomas Beckett and the flag that flew above him. And when people passed by, they waved. Not out of pity, but out of respect. He was no longer the old man on the bench. He was our veteran, their neighbor, his own kind of landmark. And though Thomas never asked for any of it, he accepted it with quiet grace. For him, the recognition wasn't about medals or monuments. It was about being remembered, about knowing that after so many years of honoring others in silence, someone had finally honored him in return. The seasons shifted quietly around Crestwood Park. Spring gave way to summer, then melted into a golden autumn. The sycamore leaves turned amber and fell like old letters onto the bench beneath the flagpole, the same bench Thomas Beckett had occupied for so many years. Then, one crisp morning, the bench sat empty. No cane, no brown jacket, no faded cap. At first, no one panicked. Perhaps he was just late. Maybe he'd stayed home to rest. But as the days passed and the bench remained untouched, the town began to understand. Thomas Beckett had taken his final walk to the flag. Word spread gently, as it tends to in small towns. There was no formal obituary, just a short note in the local paper. Sergeant Thomas Beckett, USMC, passed away peacefully in his sleep. Age 82, decorated veteran, beloved neighbor. But the people of Crestwood knew he was more than that. On the morning after the news broke, Eli arrived at the park with his mother. He carried a small American flag and a folded note. He placed both on the bench, tucking the note beneath the brass plaque that now seemed to shine brighter than before. Other visitors followed: a single red rose, a Marine Corps coin, a handwritten letter. The bench became a living memorial, not just to a man, but to a life of quiet honor. The flag above still flew strong, its fabric catching the wind like it knew. And though Thomas was no longer there to watch it, his presence lingered. Not as a shadow, but as something steadier. Something woven into the wood of the bench, the hearts of those he'd touched, and the soil beneath that sycamore tree. Eli returned often. He no longer needed to bring a soccer ball or ask questions. He just sat, sometimes alone, sometimes with his own thoughts, looking up at the flag the way Thomas once had. And one day, when a new child asked, "Who's that bench for?" Eli smiled and said, "A man who never asked to be remembered, but who deserves to be."
If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.